Have you ever looked at a giant company, one filled with the absolute smartest people, and just wondered why it takes them forever to get anything done? It's really tempting to point the finger at bad managers or maybe unmotivated employees, but the real reason is often much more fundamental. The problem isn't always the people, it's the sheer physics of being big.
You know the feeling. A project gets bogged down, a decision takes months, and our first instinct is to assume someone, somewhere is dropping the ball. We think maybe the leadership just doesn't get it, or that someone isn't doing their job. But here's the strange part. These same slow-moving companies are the ones that attract top-tier talent. They're full of brilliant, driven people who really want to make an impact. So, if the people are great, what's actually going on?
Well, this points to a completely different idea. What if the slowness isn't a flaw but an unavoidable side effect of getting bigger? What if the very act of growing creates a kind of organizational gravity that naturally slows everything down?
To really wrap our heads around this, we can turn to a core principle from economics. It perfectly explains what happens when a company's growth goes past a certain sweet spot. And that principle is called diseconomies of scale. Now, you've probably heard of economics of scale, where getting bigger makes you more efficient. This is the exact opposite. It's the tipping point where adding more people and more resources actually starts to make you less efficient, and your average costs start to go up. This chart shows it perfectly. When a company first starts growing, its average cost for each thing it produces goes down. That's the left side of the curve, economies of scale. It hits this perfect point of efficiency right at the bottom, Q star. But if it keeps growing past that point, you see the curve start to rise again. That upward slope? That's the zone of diseconomies of scale. So that feeling of slowness, the frustrating red tape, the projects that seem to cost way more than they should, those are all just symptoms of a company operating on that rising right-hand side of the curve. It's literally grown past its most efficient size. So why does this happen? What causes this inefficiency? Well, one of the biggest culprits is something we deal with every day: communication.
Just think about it this way. On a tiny team of 3 people, you only have 3 lines of communication between them. It's simple. But if you just double that team to 6 people, the communication channels don't double to 6, they explode to 15. The growth isn't linear, it's exponential. And this gets out of hand incredibly fast. With just 10 people on a team, you're already juggling 45 different communication channels. By the time you get to a group of 50, that number has skyrocketed to over 1,200. Every new person you add creates a huge new web of connections. All of this creates what we can call communication overhead. It's like an invisible tax that gets applied to every single task. It means more meetings, more emails, more status updates, and a much higher chance for misunderstandings. All of that creates friction, and that friction slows the entire machine down. Now, communication is one big piece of the puzzle. The second major factor is the sheer weight of the formal structure a company has to build just to manage all those people. See, as a company gets bigger, it's just impossible for a handful of leaders to keep an eye on everything. So what do? To maintain some control and make sure everyone is on the same page, they add layers of management. It's a totally logical move, but every single layer you add brings more administrative cost and slows down the whole decision-making process. And over time, this can lead to something called bureaucratic inertia. This is when the company's own rules and procedures take on a life of their own. The organization just keeps doing things the way we've always done them, even if those ways don't make sense anymore. And the signs of this are probably familiar. You see things like duplication of effort, where 2 different teams are accidentally solving the same problem. Office politics can start to flare up as people compete for resources, and the people making the big decisions can become isolated from what's happening on the front lines. The end result is a company that just can't react as quickly to changes in the market. A classic real-world example of this happened at General Motors. At one point, they had 2 different divisions that independently developed their own, very similar design software. Because the organization was so huge and coordination was so difficult, they basically paid for the same thing twice and then had to spend a ton of money to merge the 2 systems later on. When you have all these layers of management, the people at the very top who are making the big strategic calls, they become insulated. They're just further away from the real-world impact of their choices, which over time can lead to some pretty poor decisions. So all of this sounds pretty negative, right? It raises a really important question. If this is the case, why do these systems even exist? I mean, if all these layers and processes make companies slow and inefficient, why do basically all large, successful companies have them? And here's the key.
These structures are not a mistake. They are a deliberate, and you could even say necessary solution to the enormous challenges that come with operating at a massive scale.
You have to think about what all this bureaucracy actually achieves. It's what allows a company to manage incredible complexity. It reduces risk by creating standards so you don't have thousands of employees just making things up as they go. It's what ensures the quality of the product is predictable, and it creates the stability needed to comply with a mountain of legal requirements.
This really gets to the heart of it. It's all about a fundamental trade-off. A small company can be incredibly agile and move super fast, but it's also high risk. One bad mistake could be the end of it. A large company, on the other hand, trades that speed and agility for stability. It moves a lot slower, sure, but it's also much more resilient and predictable.
So the next time you see a huge company moving at a snail's pace, just remember that it's not always because the people there are incompetent. More often than not, that slowness is the unavoidable price they pay for the very systems that create the stability and reduce the risk that allowed them to become so big in the first place.